Why was the hall so quiet? Not the comfortable quiet of people waiting for a lecture to begin, not the respectful hush before a ceremony. This silence was sharp, weighted, like every breath in the room had been pressed down by invisible hands. The SEAL captain's voice cut through it, strong and commanding. "Any combat pilots here?" The words rang out, slicing across the crowded auditorium. Hundreds of faces turned. Men shifted in their chairs, smirks flashing, as if the question were a kind of joke, a challenge no one really intended to answer. And then, a chair scraped against the floor. Heads whipped toward the sound. From the third row a woman rose, quiet, composed, too ordinary in appearance to be the answer to that question. She stood with her chin level, her hands calm behind her back. Laughter drifted from the rear of the hall. "You've got to be kidding." The captain's eyes fixed on her. Whispers followed, the low rumble of disbelief, some voices mocking, others dismissive. She was too slender, too young, too invisible, not at all the kind of person anyone expected to claim combat. And yet she didn't flinch, she didn't back down. Her name was Captain Emily Carter, 29 years old. On the surface she looked precise, almost delicate. Hair pinned to regulation, uniform crisp, boots polished. But in her silence there was weight, gravity, the kind that made a room shift once you truly looked. Of course, most of them never had, until now. They didn't know the childhood spent in El Paso, staring every night at her father's old Vietnam dog tags on the wall above her bed. They didn't know how she'd fall asleep wondering what it felt like to ride into battle inside a Huey with nothing but thin metal skin between you and the enemy. They didn't know how her dream of flight wasn't about glory or thrill or proving anyone wrong. It was about carrying the same quiet weight her father had carried, without ever saying it aloud. But here in this hall, none of that mattered. All they saw was a young woman standing when no one else would. The SEAL captain let the silence hang, testing her, testing the room. Someone near the back called out, "Maybe she's a drone pilot, Xbox controller and all." Laughter rippled. Another voice followed, sharper, "Or maybe she flew coffee runs." The noise swelled, a storm of dismissive voices, but she stayed still, breathing measured, eyes unwavering. "What would you have done in her place?" Shouted back, sat down, pretended you hadn't heard. Emily did none of those things. She just stood, quiet as stone in a flood. The SEAL captain's gaze narrowed. "Captain, is it?" "Yes, sir." Her voice was calm, firm, not loud, but it carried. Some of the laughter faltered. "Where'd you serve, Captain Carter?" Her answer was crisp. "Afghanistan, sir." The word dropped heavy, like a stone into deep water. For a heartbeat the hall hesitated. Then the disbelief returned, louder this time, clawing for control. "Afghanistan, probably flew the generals around. VIP transport, leather seats, air conditioning." Chuckles again, but thinner now. A few of the older veterans in the back didn't laugh. They knew what Afghanistan meant. They stared at her, curiosity flickering behind weathered eyes. The SEAL captain leaned forward. "What bird did you fly?" Emily's reply was steady. "A 60 Black Hawk, sir." This time the silence stretched longer. Everyone in that hall knew what it meant to ride in one, to cling to its steel frame while the rotors thundered and rounds cracked through the air, to hear the blades beating through a valley that might become your last. But still, the mocking voices pushed back. Maybe she was just co-pilot. Probably supply crates, not combat. The resistance clung on, but the cracks were showing. Someone noticed the faded tattoo on her wrist when her sleeve slipped back. Rotor wings earned, not decorative. Someone else noticed the glint of worn silver dog tags on a chain beneath her uniform. Not hers. Old. Vietnam old. The kind that carried ghosts. And then a scar. Subtle, pale, tracing from her temple into her hairline. The kind you don't get from bumping your head on a doorframe. A scar born in chaos and fire. The room shifted, uneasy. The captain's voice sharpened. Call sign. She didn't hesitate. Valkyrie, sir. The silence that followed was different, heavier. Some eyes widened, a whisper from the back. Wait, did she say Valkyrie? The name rippled across the rows like a ghost returning home. To most, it meant nothing. But to a few veterans who remembered the Koringal Valley, it meant everything. And for the first time, the laughter died. Still, she explained nothing. She didn't boast, didn't try to convince anyone. She stood steady, letting silence do her work. The SEAL captain tapped the table at the front. A battered Pelican case was set down. The latches clicked open, spilling gear from a dozen deployments. A grease-scarred map, a flashlight, a kneeboard, even stripped-down parts from an M240. Let's run a scenario, he said, voice level. Nothing classified, a problem set. Any combat pilot should know what to do. He gestured toward her. Captain Carter, since you're standing, pick your lane. Weapons, comms, or flight planning. Groans rose from the crowd. Of course she'll pick flight. Easiest one. Emily stepped down the aisle calm, boots quiet on the floor. She touched the edge of the table lightly, as if feeling for vibrations. Her face remained steady, but her eyes sharpened. Flight, she said, but I'll touch the others if needed. Snickers again, weather lady jokes, but she ignored them. She slid the map onto the sand table, aligning ridgelines with foam contours. Her thumb smoothed grit into a narrow saddle on the east ridge. The SEAL captain outlined the problem. Rangers pinned in a valley taking fire. 2 Blackhawks low fuel, dusk closing in, winds gusting, 1A-10 overhead for cover. Your call, Captain. Her pencil moved, a circle, a cone through the valley, calm, methodical, ingress from the east saddle, wind at our tail on approach, NVGs on, IR strobes only on chalk 2, A-10 holds east at 1,000 feet, show of force on my mark. Whispers rippled, not laughter this time but curiosity. She picked up the handheld radio, keyed it without looking. Ground element, this is chalk 1, 2 ship inbound from east saddle, 1-minute call on your smoke. Her voice had shifted, clipped, calm, radio ready. People in the back froze. Some recognized the cadence, the switch in tone, the muscle memory of a voice that had lived inside a cockpit under fire. The JTAC simulator voice played along. LZ is contested. Sporadic fire from the North Tree line. 3 urgent, 2 priority casualties. Dusty, say approach. Emily scribbled on the kneeboard, speaking without pause. Approach from east. Chalk 2 offset left, high cover. Step down landing to mitigate dust. South side of clearing only. Painted rock reflects IR, avoid. Egress south along river, climb hard east back to saddle. Wave off if unbriefed light appears. Copy. The JTAC paused, almost forgetting his script. Copy. She didn't stop. She recited a medevac 9-line from memory, each detail clean, precise. Coordinates, call signs, casualty categories, marking methods. Her cadence unbroken. The hall had gone quiet again, not doubting silence, listening silence. The Marine lieutenant who joked about coffee runs earlier stared at her hands on the kneeboard. His smirk was gone. Emily turned to the scattered weapon parts. The SEAL captain nodded. Crew chief calls gun issue. Feed tray jams. What then? She moved instantly, hands sure. Cleared the belt. Knuckles wrapped the feed tray where dents like to hide. Tapped the burr no one else could see. Explained the fix in clean, technical language. 15 seconds or less. Otherwise, call cold gun. A retired door gunner whispered from the back, almost reverent. Yeah. The room was silent again, but this time it was the silence of realization. Emily set the parts down gently. Then she lifted the radio once more, walked the hall through the landing. The hover, the loading, the wave-off. Her hands made tiny gestures, invisible controls guiding invisible rotors. And the room leaned with her. When she finished, she wrote fuel numbers and alternate landing zones on the card and slid it toward the captain. calm, precise, unshaken. Then she spoke softly. "We do it again if we have to. We cycle until we've got them." A breath moved through the hall, heavy, uneasy. No one laughed now. The silence wasn't doubt anymore. It was something else. Something closer to respect. And yet, what no one in that hall realized, this was only the beginning. What made her so calm in that storm? How could she hold the line, while an entire hall of men tried to laugh her down? The truth was simple. Emily Carter had been doubted her whole life. Doubt wasn't new to her, it was oxygen. And like oxygen, she had learned how to breathe it without choking. She stood there at the sand table, the grease-stained map and scattered parts before her, and let silence settle around her. Silence was a weapon. She had wielded it many times. But not everyone was finished testing her. A burly Marine sergeant leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, voice booming across the hall. "Come on, Captain. Anyone can sketch a line on a map. Show us how you handle chaos. What happens when the bird goes blind in dust, engine sputtering, tail drifting toward rock?" It was a challenge, heavy with disbelief. Emily's jaw didn't move. Her hazel eyes locked onto the table. Slowly, she reached for the grease pencil. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "If the bird goes blind, we break it down to muscle memory. Step by step. Pedal forward, nose low, fly it out of the soup. Plant it near the river bend. Better clear air than a catastrophic rollover in brownout. My crew knows this. We brief it before we lift." Her words landed with a quiet thud. Not defiance, not bravado, just fact. The sergeant shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had wanted to rattle her. Instead, she had rattled him. But Emily wasn't speaking only to him. She was speaking to herself too. Her mind, even now, was pulling threads of memory. Afghanistan, Kandahar, the dust storms that swallowed helicopters whole. The nights when she could barely see her own knees in the cockpit, when the only thing between life and death was the feel of the pedals and the faith that her crew trusted her hands. She remembered one night in particular, unspoken, still sealed in silence. The call sign whispered through the valley, Valkyrie, a name earned, not chosen. But she wasn't about to tell them that story, not yet. The SEAL captain studied her. His eyes weren't mocking now. They were narrowing with recognition. He had heard something somewhere, a whisper, a rumor from a debrief he'd once read. But he wasn't ready to reveal it, not yet. He let the tension build. "Captain Carter," he said evenly, "what about deconfliction with Allied units? Say you lose your interpreter, ANA squad in the mix, dust thick. How do you make yourself understood?" Emily paused. A flicker of memory crossed her face, private, almost tender. When she spoke, her words came in another language. "Brothers, stand out of the dust. Turn off every white light. It's okay, I'm coming." Pashto, clean, simple, not rehearsed, not academic. Spoken with the cadence of someone who had said it before in real fear, real dust, real nights. A veteran in the back straightened sharply, eyes glassing. His lips moved silently. "She said it right. She's done it before." Emily nodded slightly in his direction, without breaking her focus on the task before her. Then she translated for the hall. "If the interpreter goes down, I tell them with my hands, palms open, head down, don't touch the skids. I show them before they're inside the rotor arc. No confusion when it matters." The room was silent again. Not the heavy silence of doubt this time, but the fragile silence of realization. Some of the young Marines who had mocked her earlier leaned forward now, as if afraid to miss the next detail. Their smirks were gone, replaced by something they hadn't expected to feel tonight: respect. The SEAL captain folded his arms, voice low. "And if a man goes down at your skids?" Emily's jaw tightened just a fraction. "Then I hold the hover. Crew chief does his job. If he can't lift him, he hooks the strap under the arms and drags. If my tail starts to slide, I wave. No heroics with 20 rotors inches from trees and rock. We live to come back around. A retired door gunner in the back exhaled hard like a confession. Yeah, his voice cracked. That's it, that's how you do it. Emily set the radio down, picked up the kneeboard again, scribbled numbers, fuel, time en route, alternate HLZ, every detail captured, nothing missed. Then she whispered almost to herself, "Again, we do it again if we have to, until everyone is out." The hall shifted on its axis. The same men who had smirked minutes earlier now sat rigid, some with shame burning in their ears, others with unease pressing heavy into their chests, because they knew, somehow, they weren't just hearing theory. They were hearing memory disguised as a training run. The SEAL captain let the silence stretch. His eyes flicked once to the scar at her temple, then to the faded rotor wing tattoo, then to the chain around her neck, dog tags that weren't her own. Pieces of a puzzle were forming, a story she hadn't told, not yet. And then, without warning, the room shifted again. Two late arrivals slipped into the hall. One, a Ranger veteran, silver at the temples. The other, a Navy Master Chief with the kind of bearing you can't fake, years of command etched into every step. They paused by the photo wall at the back. A grainy frame, a helicopter on a rocky ledge, dust frozen mid-surge, soldiers huddled around. The Ranger stopped breathing for a second. He knew the picture, knew the ledge, knew the night. The Master Chief's eyes moved to Emily. His gaze caught on the scar, the dog tags, the silence around her, and something inside him shifted. Recognition. A whisper rippled, "Is that Riordan?" The name carried weight. Men who had pulled people home from the worst valleys whispered it like a legend. Riordan didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. He just stared at Emily Carter. The Ranger's voice broke the silence, low, gravel thick. "Is that her?" No one answered. No one needed to. The SEAL captain turned the kneeboard over again, looked at the sketch Emily had drawn of the valley, lines so precise they looked like they had been carved into muscle memory. He lifted his eyes to hers. The testing edge was gone now. What replaced it was heavier, a kind of reverence still laced with disbelief. "Captain Carter," he asked softly, "what night did you get that scar?" Emily's voice didn't rise, didn't falter. "Coringal night extraction, late October." The Ranger inhaled sharply, his jaw clenched like a man bracing for impact. He turned back to the photo on the wall, the ledge, the crooked skids, the impossible landing. "The anvil," he whispered, "Lima Zulu Charlie." The Master Chief stepped forward, boots steady on the wooden floor. His voice was even, but the weight of memory sat inside it. "Call sign." Emily's eyes didn't waver. "Valkyrie." The hall inhaled as one, a sound like recognition finally taking form. Not everyone understood, but the ones who did, the Rangers, the older vets, the men who had read the reports, shifted in their seats, silent and heavy. The Ranger's voice cracked again. "My platoon was the one she came back for. Second cycle. No moon, dust so thick you couldn't see your own hands. They said the pilot never broke cadence, never lost the hover." The words rippled across the hall, and the tide turned. For the first time, the name Valkyrie carried weight in every row. Not myth, not rumor, flesh and blood, standing right there. Emily didn't smile, didn't bow. She stood exactly as she had when the first laughter hit her. Silent, steady. But the room had changed. The SEAL captain, voice quieter now, said what no one else dared. "Are you Captain Carter, the one who flew the night raid?" Emily met his eyes. Her reply was simple. "Yes, sir." And the silence that followed wasn't doubt. It wasn't mockery. It was something closer to awe. Why had it taken so long for them to see her? Why did truth always have to fight its way through noise, through doubt, through laughter that tried to cover fear? The hall was still. Rows of uniforms, boots planted on the wooden floor, eyes fixed on the woman in the third row who had risen quietly when no one else would. Captain Emily Carter, call sign Valkyrie. The name was no longer just a word whispered by a few in the back. It had shape now. Weight. Recognition curling through the rows like smoke through rafters. But disbelief dies slowly. Pride dies slower. A young Marine, one of the first who had cracked jokes about coffee runs, stood suddenly. His voice was loud, too loud, trying to claw the room back to what it had been minutes earlier. Valkyrie, he scoffed. That sounds like a comic book name, a myth. No way it's real. His words echoed, but hollow, even he seemed to hear it. Because something in the room had shifted, undeniable. Every detail she carried, tattoo, scar, dog tags, the precision of her map, the cadence of her voice, wasn't theory. It was lived experience, and the veterans knew it. At the back, an older ranger rose halfway from his seat, his hand gripping the chair in front of him as though memory itself had reached up from the past. His jaw trembled as he spoke. Coringal Valley. I wasn't on that ledge, but my men were. They told me about her. They told me about Valkyrie. A hush fell again, different now, not mocking, not skeptical, listening. The ranger's voice steadied, carrying a kind of reverence. They said when the valley turned to talc, when the world went white, she never lost the hover. When the call came for a second cycle, when everyone thought it was going to be a body recovery, she came back. She didn't leave them. The silence was so deep you could hear the HVAC hum pause between cycles. Emily didn't move. She didn't break the quiet with words. She had nothing to prove. It was the ranger who carried it forward. He pointed to the photo on the wall, the grainy image of a helicopter balanced impossibly on a jagged ledge, dust cloud rising like a storm around it. That's her, he said simply. That's the pilot who turned a ledge into a lifeline. The Marine who had scoffed earlier stared at the photo, then back at Emily. His mouth opened, then shut. No words came. Because sometimes truth doesn't need argument. Sometimes it only needs recognition. The Master Chief moved closer now. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't even look at the photo. He looked only at Emily. His voice carried the weight of nights without sleep, of men carried out of valleys by the hands of pilots who refused to quit. Captain Carter, he said, on the night they told us to hold in hope, you flew. He didn't salute. Not yet, he didn't need to. The words themselves were enough. The SEAL captain, who had begun this night with doubt in his eyes, now studied her as though seeing her for the first time. His voice had lost its testing edge. I read that report, he said slowly. Coringal extraction. I remember the line, superior airmanship under degraded visual environment, refusal to abandon friendly forces despite fuel and dust hazards. No award recommendation, just a note, just a name. He let the words hang, then asked the question no one else dared. Why wasn't there recognition, Captain? Emily's jaw flexed, not bitterness, not anger, just muscle moving against silence. It was a team night, she said softly. Crew chief earned his stripes twice. Medics did the miracle work. JTAC kept the tree line honest. I got us there and got us out. That's the job. The ranger exhaled like he had been holding that breath for years. His hand slid from the chair to his brow. A salute, slow, deliberate, not regulation, reverent. At first it was just him, one ranger saluting one pilot. Then the dam broke. Across the hall, soldiers, Marines, SEALs, airmen, men who had doubted her only moments ago rose from their chairs, one by one, salutes snapping into place, boots striking the floor in rhythm. The young Marine lieutenant, pale with shame, stood last. His hand trembled at first, then steadied. A crisp salute, born not of arrogance but of respect. The air filled with the sharp sound of palms meeting brows. Not applause, not noise, silence in motion, reverence. Emily's eyes flicked over the sea of faces, some wet with tears, some rigid with pride, some stunned. She didn't smile, she didn't bow. She raised her hand in return, steady, precise, humble. The SEAL captain's voice carried through the hall, clear and strong. "Captain Carter, combat pilot Valkyrie, on behalf of everyone here, thank you." For a long moment, no one clapped. The hall was still, filled only with the sound of held breath and pounding hearts. And then the applause came. Slow at first, then rolling like thunder through the rows, boots stamping, hands striking, voices rising not in mockery but in honor. The Afghan veteran stood, tears on his cheeks. In his own tongue he called out, voice breaking, "D Valkyrie, Dwayne Amana Malika, the angel of the brave sky." The words rippled, repeated in whispers and echoes, "Valkyrie, Valkyrie." Emily lowered her salute slowly. Her chest rose with controlled breath. Her eyes misted, but she did not break. And for the first time she allowed herself to believe what others had known for years. Her quiet duty had become something more, a symbol, a legacy. But the moment didn't belong to her alone. She knew that. She had never believed it was about her. So when the noise finally ebbed, when the applause softened back into silence, she spoke. Her voice carried steady, softer now but stronger for it. "I'm grateful for your respect," she said, "but I don't stand here because of what I did. I stand here because of what my crew did, because of the medics who never let go, because of the soldiers who carried their brothers to the bird. I did my part. Yes, but none of us survive alone, not one." Her gaze swept the hall. Young recruits in the front row shifted, ashamed of their earlier laughter. Older veterans straightened, remembering their own quiet nights, their own unsung hands. "You don't have to be the loudest voice in the room," Emily continued. "Strength doesn't always look the way you expect. Sometimes it looks like consistency. Sometimes it looks like humility. Sometimes it looks like refusing to quit even when no one's watching." Her words settled over the hall like dust after rotor wash, heavy, lingering. If you're ever tempted to mock someone because they don't look the part, remember this day. Remember that appearances don't carry soldiers out of valleys. Actions do. Silence again, but not the sharp silence of earlier doubt, the full silence of respect. She gave a small nod to the SEAL captain. "That's all I have, sir." Then she sat. No dramatic exit, no lingering in the spotlight, just as she had lived her service, quiet, steady, humble. The SEAL captain looked out over the hall. His voice carried the final chord. "You've heard it yourselves. Courage can be quiet. Heroism can wear an ordinary face. And sometimes the one you least expect to rise is the one who carries you all home." Heads nodded, eyes shone, lips pressed together against words unspoken. The hall was no longer what it had been. Where there had been doubt, there was now awe. Where there had been laughter, there was now reverence. And where there had been silence, there was now the loudest respect of all. But the story wasn't finished, not for Emily Carter. Because courage doesn't end with applause. It endures in silence, in memory, in the weight of what you carry long after the room has emptied. What happens after the applause fades? When the boots stop stamping, when the last salute lowers, when the echoes of respect dissolve back into silence, what remains? For Emily Carter, it was never about the noise. She had never lived for it, never waited for recognition, never asked for acknowledgement. And so when the room roared and then quieted, she felt the same thing she had always felt after combat, a strange, hollow stillness. She sat, hands folded in her lap, posture steady. Around her, men still wiped at their eyes, cleared their throats, shifted in their seats as if rearranging something heavy inside themselves. But Emily didn't move. She had carried heavier weights than applause before. Her father had taught her that silence was sometimes the truest companion. She remembered El Paso nights, the desert wide and endless, the stars sharp and bright. Her father sitting on the porch, Vietnam dog tags swinging faintly in the warm wind. He never told stories. He never needed to. She had seen enough in the way he rubbed his thumb across those tags, enough to know the cost of service, enough to understand that most truths don't fit into words. That memory pressed against her chest now, grounding her. The SEAL captain broke the quiet first. His voice was softer than before, stripped of edge. "Captain Carter," he said, "that was one hell of a demonstration, but I have to ask you something else, something different." The room leaned in again. "Why didn't you tell your story sooner?" Emily looked up, her hazel-green eyes steady, unblinking. She thought about the question, thought about every time someone had smirked, every time she had been underestimated, ignored, pushed aside. She thought about the scar on her temple, the nights she had whispered promises to wounded soldiers in the back of her bird. Her answer came simple, because it was never mine alone to tell. The hall was still. "It belonged to my crew," she continued, voice steady. "It belonged to the men we carried out of valleys, to the medics who kept them breathing, to the rangers who fought to drag their brothers through dust. My story is just one thread. To tell it loud, to hold it up like a trophy, that would have been theft." Her words landed like a stone, heavy, honest. The Master Chief nodded slowly, his face unreadable but his eyes softened. He understood. Many in the room did. But the younger soldiers, the ones who had never lived through a valley extraction, never heard rotor wash blur into silence, looked puzzled. Why would someone carry that kind of legacy quietly, almost invisibly? Emily read the confusion in their eyes. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping lower, pulling the room closer. "Courage doesn't always roar," she said. "It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like humility. Sometimes it looks like someone who refuses to quit even when no one is watching. That's what service is. That's what it's always been." Her voice trailed, the weight of it lingered. But beneath the calm, beneath the poise, Emily carried her own shadows. She didn't show them in the hall, not fully. But they were there. The memory of blood soaking her flight suit, the smell of hydraulic fluid mixing with dust, the sound of a young soldier's voice fatting on the radio, whispering that he wasn't ready to die. She had promised him, "I've got you. I'm not done with you." And somehow he had lived. But not all of them had. And it was those voices, the ones that never answered again, that followed her long after the missions ended, long after she hung up the flight suit. The applause couldn't drown them out. Nothing could. The SEAL captain seemed to sense something in her silence. He cleared his throat. "Captain, I want you to stay after the symposium. There's a team that needs to hear from you, a SEAL unit prepping for deployment. They'll be running joint ops, possible medevac risk in the mountains. They need a voice like yours, not from a manual, from someone who's lived it." Emily didn't flinch, didn't show hesitation. "Yes, sir," she said simply. But inside something stirred. That familiar pull, the unshakable truth she carried, that no matter how much she wanted to leave the past behind, the past wasn't done with her. The ranger who had spoken earlier stepped forward now. His voice was quiet, almost fragile. "Ma'am," he said, "I never got to thank you. My men, some of them, came home because of you. I wanted you to know that." Emily's jaw tightened. Her eyes softened just slightly. She gave him a single nod. "Then that's enough," she said. The ranger swallowed hard. His voice cracked. "It'll never be enough." Emily didn't answer. Some debts aren't meant to be paid. They're meant to be carried. The SEAL captain dismissed the hall then, his voice carrying finality. "You've all heard it tonight. Courage isn't volume. Courage isn't ego. Courage is duty lived steady, lived quiet, lived true." Chairs scraped. Boots thudded against the floor. The hall emptied slowly, men and women filing out, their faces marked by what they had heard, by the story they hadn't expected. But even as they left, whispers trailed behind. "Valkyrie, that was her. I'll never forget this night." Emily stayed seated, calm, hands folded, waiting. The Afghan veteran approached her, his step slow. He paused at her row, his weathered face wet with tears. In Pashto, he murmured again, "We saw you." Emily looked up, eyes meeting his, and answered in the same language. "I saw you too." He nodded, a tremor in his throat, then turned away. When the last of them had left, when only the SEAL captain, the master chief, and the ranger remained, Emily rose. Her boots sounded soft against the floor, steady as ever. She walked to the photo wall once more, stood before the grainy picture of the ledge. Her hand hovered near the glass. She traced the outline of the helicopter with her finger, not touching, just remembering. The slant of the rocks, the dust cloud frozen in grain, the silhouette of a pilot standing near the cockpit. She didn't say it was her. She didn't need to. The Master Chief stopped beside her. His voice was rough with memory. "When the valley turned to dust, you didn't blink." Emily exhaled. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "I blinked," she admitted. "But the crew didn't, the medic didn't, the rangers didn't. I just did the part with the pedals." The Master Chief stared at her for a long time, then gave the smallest nod of respect. The kind of nod you give to someone who has earned more than words could ever hold. The ranger wiped at his eyes. He whispered again, almost to himself, "That's her." Emily turned from the photo, her face steady once more. "Where do you want me, sir?" she asked the SEAL captain. His answer came without hesitation. "With my men, tonight." She nodded, no question, no pause. Because that was Emily Carter's way. Quiet duty, silent resilience. As they walked toward the briefing room, her father's dog tags brushed faintly against her chest. The sound was soft, almost lost in the hum of the building. But to her, it was loud enough. A reminder, a promise she still carried. Sometimes courage doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it waits quietly until it's called. And tonight, once again, it had been called. Why did they ask her to stay? Out of everyone in that hall, why was it her voice the SEAL captain wanted his men to hear before they deployed? Emily knew the answer, though she would never say it aloud. It wasn't because she spoke louder than anyone else. It wasn't because she carried medals or rank or recognition. It was because she carried something heavier, memory that lived in her bones, in her scars, in the way her voice didn't shake when she recited details most people only learned under fire. That night, long after the applause had faded, she sat in a dim briefing room with a dozen Navy SEALs. They weren't laughing like the men in the hall had. They weren't mocking. Their faces were sharp, attentive, every movement taut with discipline. But behind their stillness, she recognized the flicker she had seen in countless soldiers before deployment, anxiety hiding beneath confidence. The SEAL captain stood at the front, his voice calm. "Gentlemen, this is Captain Emily Carter, call sign Valkyrie. She's here because she knows what it means to pull men out of fire. Listen to her. Every word matters." The SEALs turned to her, quiet, expectant. Emily didn't like speeches, never had, but she had promised herself something long ago. If her experience could keep even one soldier alive, she would speak, even if her throat tightened, even if the ghosts pressed close. She stepped forward, boots soft against the concrete floor. "If you ever ride my bird," she began, her voice calm, steady, "you need to know 3 things." The room leaned in. "One," she said, holding up a finger. "If I wave off, it's not because I'm afraid. It's because if I push a bad landing, I'll kill you. Discipline is not cowardice. Remember that." Her eyes moved from face to face, not challenging, just steady. 2, if I say heads down, you put your face in the dirt. Don't question me, don't hesitate. I won't lie to you over the rotor noise." The SEALs shifted slightly. They understood. "And 3, Emily continued, her voice softening, if you're carrying a brother who's bleeding, don't apologize for the blood. Put him on my floor. Let your hands tremble later." Her words fell into silence, the kind of silence that wasn't emptiness but gravity. One of the younger SEALs cleared his throat. His voice was low, hesitant. "Ma'am, what if you don't come back around? What if the bird doesn't make it?" The question hung sharp in the air. Others glanced at him, but no one silenced him. They wanted the answer too. Emily didn't flinch, she didn't soften it. "Then you fight," she said quietly. "You fight until another bird comes, and if it doesn't, you fight anyway. But you don't plan for that. You plan for survival. You plan to trust the people beside you. That's what keeps you alive." The young seal nodded slowly. His jaw tightened, but his eyes steadied. The seal captain gave a small nod. He understood why she was there. But Emily wasn't finished. She moved to the map spread across the table. Mountain ridges, valleys, marked villages. Her hand traced lines the way she had done in simulators for years. "You'll be moving into terrain like this," she said. "Steep ridges, thin air. Winds that cut sideways. Don't trust what looks open from above. It lies. Dust will blind you faster than bullets sometimes. If you go down, don't waste white light. Don't panic, trust the silence. We'll see you if you make it clean." The men leaned closer. She had their full attention now. "Courage," she said softly, almost like a confession, "isn't what you think it is. It's not loud. It's not perfect. It's a set of small decisions stacked on top of each other when the night feels too long. That's what I learned. That's all I can give you." Her throat tightened, but she steadied it, because they needed her voice steady, not broken. The SEAL captain closed the session with a firm nod. "That's enough. Get rest. We move in 72 hours. The men filed out, their boots heavy against the floor. Some gave her small nods as they passed. Respect, quiet, unsaid. When the room emptied, Emily stayed behind. She gathered the maps, the grease pencils, the scattered folders. Her hand lingered a moment on the ridgelines traced in ink. She closed her eyes. For a brief second, she wasn't in the quiet briefing room anymore. She was back in Afghanistan, dust surging, radios crackling, the smell of hot metal and burning oil thick in her lungs, the weight of a wounded soldier on the floor behind her, his blood spreading into the seams of her flight suit. She shook the memory loose, opened her eyes. The SEAL captain stood in the doorway watching her. His voice was low. "Captain, I know you don't want recognition. I know you'd rather stay in the background. But these men, they needed you tonight. You gave them something manuals can't." Emily turned to him, her eyes steady. "I didn't give them anything," she said softly. "I just reminded them of what they already carry." The captain studied her a long moment, then nodded. He didn't argue. Later, alone in her quarters, Emily sat on the edge of her bed. The dog tag swung faintly against her chest as she leaned forward, elbows on her knees. She held them in her hand, cold metal against warm skin, her father's name stamped deep in steel. She whispered into the stillness, barely audible, "I'm still carrying it, Dad. I haven't put it down." She let the silence answer. But as the night wore on, sleep didn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, the valley returned. The dust, the sound of rounds cracking against metal, the voice on the radio fatting, the second cycle she almost didn't make. She rubbed her temple where the scar still traced under her hairline. Some wounds heal into skin, others stay raw inside. The next morning she walked into the operations hangar where the SEALs prepped, gear stacked, weapons laid out, maps pinned to walls, the air electric with focus. One of the younger SEALs, the same one who had asked what if the bird never came, looked up as she entered. He hesitated, then gave a small nod. Not cocky, not forced, just respect. Emily returned the nod, nothing more. She didn't need more. Because respect, the real kind, doesn't roar. It doesn't announce itself. It's quiet, earned, like everything else that mattered in her life. She moved past them toward the captain's office. He was waiting. "Orders came down," he said. "The op is greenlit, remote valley, thin air, possible entanglement with insurgents. We'll need air cover for exfil. You'll be on standby." Emily's jaw tightened. Standby, the word burned. She had been told it too many times before. Too young, too calm, too unproven. Always standby. But this time she didn't argue, she only nodded. "Yes, sir." Inside, though, a storm stirred. She knew what standby meant. It meant they would call her if everything else went wrong, if disaster hit, if they had no choice. She had lived her whole career that way, the quiet option, the last resort. But she also knew something else. When the call came, if it came, she would answer. Because that was who she was. The quiet storm no one saw coming. How many times could she hear the word standby before it hollowed her out completely? How many times could she be told to wait while others carried the weight, while others proved themselves, while she sat in the shadows with a headset pressed against her ear? Emily Carter had learned patience long ago. She had endured instructors who laughed, peers who doubted, commanders who thought calm meant weak. She had carried that word standby like a second set of dog tags around her neck, but it never stopped cutting. The SEAL captain's words echoed in her head even after she left his office. "You'll be on standby." That night in the dim quiet of the hangar, she sat alone beside her bird. The Black Hawk gleamed under low lights, its fuselage scarred but steady, a machine built for storms. Her hand rested on its cold skin as if she could will it into motion. Her crew chief walked past, tools slung in hand. He gave her a glance, then a slow nod. No words. He knew what standby meant. He'd been there before, waiting in silence while others decided whether their skill was needed, whether their lives would be risked. Emily traced the faded tattoo on her wrist. Rotor wings. Earned. Permanent. A reminder that she wasn't meant to be idle. She whispered almost like a prayer, "Call me when it goes wrong, I'll answer." Hours passed, she didn't sleep. The SEALs moved out under the cover of night. Their boots hit the dirt with quiet determination, shadows blending into the valley. Radios crackled faintly across the ops center. Their voices were clipped, professional, focused. Emily listened from her corner, headset on, eyes scanning the board. She wasn't in the fight. Not yet. She was only a ghost at the edge of it, forced to sit with her own reflection in the dark glass of the monitor. Her stomach coiled, not with fear, with restraint. The mission rolled forward. First reports came clean, target compound reached, resistance light, objectives unfolding. She exhaled slowly. Maybe it would stay clean. Maybe they wouldn't need her. Maybe tonight would end with silence, and she would walk back to her quarters carrying nothing but the ache of being unseen again. But deep down she knew better. Missions in valleys never stayed clean. The first crack came quick. A burst of radio static, broken words, contact, fire from the ridgeline, SEALs pinned in, multiple wounded. The ops room tensed. Officers leaned forward, heads snapping toward screens, ears straining for details. Emily sat straighter. Her jaw tightened. Her hand slid toward her kneeboard instinctively. The radio spat again, a voice sharp, urgent. "We're taking heavy fire, request immediate support, we need air." The ops commander swore under his breath. He grabbed the headset, barking for available assets. But the closest A-10 was already committed. The other birds were hours away. Too far, too late. Emily's heart hammered, but her face stayed calm. She knew what this meant. Still, she waited. She had always been good at waiting. The radio crackled again, louder this time. "Casualties mounting, we're losing ground, where's our ride?" The commander's face tightened. His knuckles whitened around the mic. "Hold position, support en route." But everyone in the room knew what that meant. En route wasn't fast enough. En route meant bleeding in the dirt while the clock ticked louder than gunfire. Emily's hand tightened around the kneeboard. She heard herself whisper the words she had spoken years ago into a valley full of dust. "I'm not done with you. Stay with me." The commander turned, scanning the room for answers he didn't have. His eyes landed on her. For a second, silence pressed the air flat. Then Emily stood. Her voice was steady. "Put me in." The commander hesitated. He didn't need to ask if she was ready. He knew. Everyone knew. Still, the word hung between them, the same word that had followed her for years. Stand by. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "Sir, they won't last, you know it. I've trained this valley 100 times. I know the winds, I know the dust. I can get them out." The room was silent, waiting. The commander's jaw worked. He stared at her, caught between fear of losing another bird and the impossible choice of leaving men behind. Finally he exhaled, sharp and heavy. "Go." The word hit her chest like fuel. She didn't smile, she didn't nod. She just turned on her heel and moved. Her crew chief was already running. The medics snapped their kits closed. The Black Hawk roared to life, blades chopping the night air. Emily climbed into the cockpit, strapped in, hands moving with the precision of 1,000 flights. Switches clicked, gauges lit. Her voice came calm over the intercom. "Chalk 1 ready." The bird lifted, skids rising from the tarmac. Dust swirled. The city lights fell away beneath them. For a heartbeat, Emily felt the weight in her chest ease. She wasn't on standby anymore. She was where she belonged. In the fight, the valley loomed ahead, dark ridges jagged against the horizon, the kind of terrain that swallowed helicopters whole, the kind of terrain where names were made or lost forever. Her crew chief's voice cut in. "Ma'am, you sure about this?" Emily's eyes narrowed on the shadows ahead. Her reply was simple. "We don't leave them." The bird thundered forward into the night. What did the valley remember? Would it remember her as the pilot who once balanced steel on a ledge in the dark? Or would it take her this time, swallowing bird, crew, and the men who waited below? The ridgeline grew larger in the cockpit glass. Shadows jagged, winds shearing sideways, the kind of air that made steel feel like paper. Emily's hands were calm on the cyclic, her boots steady on the pedals. Inside, her pulse hammered. Outside, she was stone. Her crew chief leaned forward, headset pressed tight. "Ma'am, radio traffic's hot. They're in it deep." The headset crackled. Gunfire in the background, a strained voice. "Multiple wounded, enemy close, repeat, danger close. We need extraction now." Emily's jaw flexed. She keyed the mic, her voice calm. "This is Valkyrie inbound, hold position, we're coming." The SEAL who answered didn't know her, not really. But his reply carried something raw, like a man grabbing a rope tossed from a cliff. "Copy, Valkyrie, we'll hold." The bird knifed forward. Tracer fire stitched the sky ahead, bright lines across the dark. Emily angled low, using the ridges as cover. The Black Hawk vibrated under her grip, metal shuddering with every gust. Her crew chief muttered, "Hell of a valley." Emily's reply was almost a whisper, "I've been here before." The memory pressed in, Coringle, the ledge, the impossible hover. But this wasn't that night. This was now. And now demanded every nerve, every ounce of focus. 30 seconds, she called. The crew braced. The bird dipped. Dust began to rise already, a warning of the storm to come. Voices on the radio grew frantic. "We're running out of time. We can't hold much longer." Emily's throat tightened, but her voice stayed steady. "Stay low, Valkyrie's here." The first bullet struck the fuselage. Thuds like fists against metal. The crew chief swore under his breath, guns swinging to the open door. Muzzle flash lit the night. Emily didn't flinch. She rode the bird lower, nose dipping, tail sliding to keep balance against the crosswinds. Dust surged, swallowing the world in seconds. Brownout, the killer of helicopters. Her visibility vanished. Instruments blurred with static. The earth disappeared. But her hands knew what to do. Pedals, collective, tiny corrections almost invisible. The muscle memory of 1,000 training runs. The crew chief's voice shouted in her ear, "I can't see the ground. Where the hell are we?" Emily's eyes locked on the artificial horizon. "Trust me," she said. The bird steadied, hanging blind in the storm. Through the haze a shadow moved, shapes, figures waving, dragging bodies through dust, the SEALs. "Visual," the crew chief yelled. "Hold hover," Emily ordered. The skids kissed earth with a jolt. The Black Hawk wobbled, then steadied. Dust roared up, choking the air. The world vanished again. The back doors burst open. Shadows scrambled in, coughing, shouting. Blood streaked their uniforms. One was half-dragged, half-carried, limp. Another clutched his side, crimson leaking through his vest. Rounds cracked against the armor plating. Sparks jumped from the door frame. The crew chief leaned out, firing short bursts to keep the ridge line honest. "They're on us, ma'am. We gotta move." "Two more," a SEAL shouted from the dirt, dragging another brother through the haze. Emily's instincts screamed to lift, to get airborne before the valley ate them whole. But she didn't move. Her voice cut through the chaos, calm and sharp. "Hold, we don't leave them." Seconds stretched like years. The last SEALs tumbled in, bloodied but breathing. The crew chief slapped the door shut. "We're loaded." "Strap in," Emily ordered. She lifted collective. The bird lurched, fighting gravity, fighting wind, fighting death itself. The skids tore free of the earth. Dust swallowed everything, blinding, suffocating. Bullets tore past, tracers slicing inches from the cockpit glass. Emily kept her hands steady, breath even. "Easy, easy." The Black Hawk clawed upward, rotors straining. Slowly, painfully, the dust fell away. The ridgeline emerged below, enemy fire peppering the valley. Her crew chief exhaled sharp. "We're clear of the ground." "Not yet," Emily said. The bird tilted, engines screaming. She swung low along the ridge, keeping the SEALs inside from open fire, her eyes locked on the horizon. The valley tried to drag her back, but she refused. Radio voices burst through the static. "Valkyrie, are you airborne?" Emily keyed the mic, voice steady despite the storm inside her chest. "We're airborne, we have them all." A pause, then a reply raw with relief. "God bless you, Valkyrie." The crew worked feverishly in the back. Medics pressed gauze against wounds, shouted vitals over the roar. Blood pooled on the floor. The smell was thick, metallic. Emily's eyes flicked once to the mirror angled toward the cabin. She saw them, faces pale, lips trembling, hands clutching each other. Alive. Alive because she had refused to leave them. Her throat tightened, but she forced her focus forward. The valley wasn't finished yet. Machine gun fire ripped from the ridge. The Black Hawk shuddered as rounds struck its side. Warning lights flared across the panel. "Tails hit," the crew chief shouted. Emily's jaw clenched. She steadied her hands, fighting the shuddering bird. "We can still fly." The SEAL captain's voice crackled through the radio, frantic. "Valkyrie, do you copy? What's your status?" Emily exhaled, forcing calm into every syllable. "We're hit but stable. We're bringing them home." The valley fell behind them, slowly shrinking into shadow. The fire thinned. The sky opened wider. Her crew chief sagged back against the frame, sweat streaking his face. "Hell of a ride, ma'am." Emily's voice was soft, almost inaudible. "We're not down yet." She kept her eyes on the horizon, steady hands refusing to shake. Behind her, one of the wounded SEALs stirred weakly. His voice cracked, broken, but audible over the roar. "Pilot, what's your name?" Emily's throat tightened. She didn't turn, she didn't answer right away. Finally, her voice came low. "Call me Valkyrie." The cabin went silent. Even in pain, even bleeding, the men understood what that meant. The name wasn't myth anymore. It was flesh, blood, a steady hand on the pedals, refusing to quit. Emily flew on, her heart pounding, her scar burning under sweat. She didn't think of herself. She thought of the weight behind her, the men who had trusted her, the voices she refused to let go silent tonight. The bird thundered out of the valley, climbing into open sky. They were going home. What does victory feel like when it's paid for in blood? Not parades, not medals, not speeches. It feels like silence in the back of a helicopter. The silence of men who are breathing but too weak to speak. The silence of medics with blood up to their elbows, working without rest. The silence of a pilot holding steady hands on controls while her chest pounds like a drum she refuses to hear. The Black Hawk cleared the valley, rotors straining, body rattling under the punishment of rounds that had chewed its tail. The ridgeline faded behind them, the last tracer fire vanishing into the night. In the cabin, the SEALs clutched one another, battered, bleeding, alive. Emily kept her eyes forward. She knew better than to celebrate too soon. She had lost men within sight of safety before. She wouldn't tempt fate by thinking it was finished. 10 minutes to base, she called over the intercom. Her crew chief gave a weary thumbs up. Behind him, the medics barked vitals, calling out for more gauze, more pressure. One of the wounded SEALs convulsed. They fought to keep him here, their voices breaking but their hands steady. Emily's throat tightened. She whispered under her breath, so low the intercom didn't catch it, "Stay with us. I'm not done with you." The bird carried them through the dark, the horizon finally glowing faint with the promise of safety. When they touched down at the forward operating base, chaos exploded. Medics rushed forward, stretchers slamming against metal. SEALs staggered out, some under their own strength, others barely conscious, carried by brothers who refused to let go. Emily powered down the bird with slow, practiced hands, switch by switch, rotor wash fatting. Her body shook with adrenaline, but her movements never faltered. Her crew chief slipped past her, his hand brushing her shoulder briefly. A wordless gesture, respect, gratitude. She sat for a moment longer in the cockpit, the hum dying, the silence swelling. Her hands rested on her knees, trembling now that no one could see. The dog tags against her chest felt heavier than ever, her father's name pressed into steel. She whispered again, still carrying it, "Dad." She finally climbed down, boots hitting the tarmac. The night air hit her face, cool and sharp, carrying the smell of dust and blood. The SEAL captain was waiting, his uniform streaked with dirt, his face pale but steady. He had been on comms the whole time, listening to every word, every heartbeat of that flight. He stepped forward, eyes locking on hers. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, deliberately, he extended his hand. "Captain Carter," he said. His voice broke, he steadied it. "Thank you." Emily clasped his hand, firm, no smile, just steady. "They brought each other home," she replied. "I just gave them the ride." The SEAL captain's jaw tightened, his voice lowered. "No, ma'am, you gave them life." Emily didn't argue. She never argued when praise came. She just let silence answer. Behind them, the stretchers rolled past, wheels clattering against concrete. Some of the wounded raised weak hands in her direction. One whispered, voice faint but clear enough to carry, "Valkyrie." The word drifted through the night, caught in the wash of memory and exhaustion. Others repeated it softer, not as myth now but as truth. Emily didn't turn. She didn't wave. She stood steady until the last stretcher disappeared into the med bay. Later, when the debrief came, she sat at the long table with the ops commander and the SEAL leadership. The reports were clinical, coordinates, times, damage sustained, casualty counts. Her name was mentioned once, maybe twice. No flourish, no speech. She preferred it that way. But when the room emptied, the ops commander lingered. He watched her a moment, then asked the question he hadn't dared before. "Why do you do it, Captain? Why keep flying into valleys that try to kill you?" Emily looked at him, her hazel-green eyes calm. She thought about the scar at her temple, the tattoo on her wrist, the dog tags against her chest. Her answer came soft, "Because someone always waits at the bottom, and I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try." The commander studied her, then nodded slowly. He didn't press further. Some truths are enough in their simplest form. That night, alone in her quarters, Emily sat on the edge of her bunk. She unlaced her boots, set them carefully aside. Her body ached. Her hands still trembled faintly. She held the dog tags again. Her thumb traced the letters of her father's name until the edges bit into her skin. She remembered the porch in El Paso, his silence, his eyes in the desert night. She wondered if he had felt the same, the weight of lives carried, the ghosts of those he couldn't save, the quiet dignity of simply doing the job. Tears stung her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She whispered to the empty room, "I'm still here, still carrying it, still trying." Outside, the base was quiet. The valley behind them slept again, holding its secrets in stone and dust. But for those who had lived it, who had been pulled from it, who had felt the beat of rotor blades in the darkest night, the valley would never be just geography again. It would be memory. It would be survival. And at the center of that memory would be the quiet pilot who refused to quit. She didn't need medals. She didn't need parades. She had given what mattered most. She had given men their lives back. In the years that followed, some of those SEALs would speak her name. Others would only whisper it. Some would never say it at all, but they would carry it inside them, a silent vow, that when they were called, they would not quit either. And Emily Carter, Valkyrie, would keep flying, keep answering the call, as long as her hands could hold the controls steady. Because courage was never about noise. It was about silence, about sacrifice, about dignity that doesn't need to announce itself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.